January 2017, Lakewood, Colorado. It was a quiet winter morning in the suburbs of Lakewood, where streets were lined with snow-dusted rooftops, and porch lights still glowed from the night before. This was the kind of neighborhood where families felt safe, where doors were left unlocked, where neighbors smiled at each other in passing, where tragedies happened somewhere else. But that illusion shattered when police stormed a home on Willowcrest Drive. Inside, in the middle of a ransacked living room, 18-year-old Emily Parker lay motionless on the floor. The metallic scent of gunpowder hung thick in the air. The glass coffee table was shattered, bullet casings scattered across the hardwood. And near the front door, a police officer lay still, another casualty of a night that should have never happened. The officers who arrived first on the scene froze at the sight before them. Two bodies. One officer down, blood staining the white carpet. It was chaos. Paramedics rushed in, but there was nothing they could do. Emily Parker was gone. But the most haunting part? This wasn't just a home invasion. This wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. This was something much darker. Because Emily Parker wasn't a stranger to the family who lived here. She wasn't just an intruder. She had been a part of their lives. And before this night ended in bloodshed, she had been someone's obsession. Now, detectives were left with a question that would unravel one of the most disturbing cases in Lakewood's history. How did a high school senior end up dead in her former coach's house? And more importantly, what had driven her to break in that night? 2 days after the shooting, police pieced together the first clue in this tragic puzzle. Emily Parker wasn't just some troubled teenager who had broken into the home of Ryan Mitchell, a well-respected high school basketball coach. She had once been his student, and more than that, she had been his secret. Investigators began retracing the events that led up to her final moments, uncovering a relationship that should have never existed. At 28 years old, Ryan Mitchell had built a solid reputation in Lakewood. To the outside world, he was everything a young athlete could look up to: dedicated, disciplined, charismatic. A mentor who genuinely cared about his players, pushing them to be better both on and off the court. He was also a family man, married to Lauren Mitchell, a sweet and soft-spoken kindergarten teacher. Ryan seemed to have it all. The couple had recently moved into their dream home, a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood. To everyone who knew them, they were the perfect couple. But secrets have a way of hiding in plain sight. And one of those secrets was Emily Parker. Emily wasn't like most girls her age. On the surface, she fit the perfect image of an all-American high school senior. Captain of the cheerleading squad, bright smile, always surrounded by friends. But behind the carefully crafted image, Emily was struggling. Her parents had gone through a messy divorce when she was 13, leaving her caught in the middle of two people who barely acknowledged her, unless they were using her as a weapon against each other. Her father had moved across the country. Her mother had remarried within a year. And Emily? She felt like she had been forgotten. All her life, she had craved love, attention, and validation. So when she met Coach Ryan Mitchell during her junior year, she saw in him something she had never had before: a strong, kind, dependable man. And she wanted him. At first, it was innocent. Emily would linger after practices, asking for extra help on her conditioning workouts. She would send emails about schoolwork that weren't necessary. She would find excuses to be near Ryan whenever she could. And Ryan? He noticed. At first, he brushed it off as a harmless student-teacher admiration. It wasn't unusual for athletes to look up to their coaches, to see them as role models. But as time passed, he realized Emily's attention wasn't like the others. She stared at him a little too long. Her compliments were a little too personal. Her presence in his office became too frequent. And whether he wanted to admit it or not, he liked the attention. Ryan's marriage with Lauren was beginning to feel strained. They had been trying to start a family, and the pressure of it all, failed pregnancy tests, endless doctor visits, sleepless nights filled with stress, had created a distance between them. Emily, on the other hand, made him feel needed, wanted, admired. And one evening in October 2015, in the dimly lit office of the Lakewood High School gym, that connection crossed a dangerous line. Emily leaned in. Ryan didn't stop her. And just like that, a secret affair was born. They thought no one would notice. But secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, always leave a trail. And this one? It would lead to tragedy. At first, Ryan Mitchell thought he had control. He told himself the affair was temporary, a mistake he could justify in the privacy of his own mind. It wasn't love. It wasn't serious. It was just a distraction, something to fill the emotional void in his life. And eventually it would end. But Emily Parker had other plans. Because to her, this wasn't a fling. This was everything. In the beginning, Emily played the role of the perfect secret. She kept their meetings discreet, whispered his name only in private, and acted like just another student in public. But as the months passed, something changed. Emily stopped being careful. She would touch his arm a little too long in the hallways. She would slip notes into his gym bag with hearts drawn next to his name. She would text him at all hours of the night, demanding his attention. And then, one evening, when Ryan didn't respond to her message fast enough, Emily showed up at his house. She didn't knock. She just stood there, in the cold, on his doorstep, staring through the window as if she belonged there. Lauren was home. Ryan panicked. He rushed outside, pulling Emily away before his wife could see her. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, his grip firm on her wrist. Emily just smiled. "I missed you." That night, for the first time, Ryan felt afraid of her. Because this wasn't just an affair anymore. This was an obsession. Emily no longer cared about secrecy. She wanted more. When Ryan wouldn't answer her texts, she would call him over and over until he picked up. When he canceled a meeting, she would show up at his practices, watching him from the bleachers. She even followed him home once, just to make sure he was really with Lauren. And when she saw him kiss his wife on their front porch one evening, something inside her snapped. The love she had for him turned into jealousy. The admiration became resentment. If she couldn't have Ryan completely, then no one could. Ryan tried to distance himself. He stopped answering her messages as often. He avoided being alone with her. He even told her one day, "This has to stop." But Emily? She just smiled. "You don't mean that." Her confidence shook him. Because in her mind, this wasn't a mistake. This was meant to be. And if he thought he could just walk away, he was wrong. By the winter of 2015, Ryan Mitchell realized something terrifying. He wasn't having an affair anymore. He was being hunted. Emily Parker's obsession had spiraled into something he no longer controlled. She wasn't just texting him late at night. She was watching. She wasn't just jealous of his wife. She wanted her gone. And Ryan? He was too late to stop what was coming. One evening, after practice, Ryan walked into his office and found Emily already there, waiting for him. Her presence was unnerving, too calm, too familiar, as if she had every right to be there. "You changed your number," she said, tilting her head slightly, her voice smooth but laced with accusation. Ryan exhaled, keeping his voice low. "Emily, this has to stop." She smiled. "You don't mean that." "I do." His jaw clenched. This was a mistake. It should have never happened. Something flickered in her eyes. Hurt. Anger. Something dangerous. "You love me," she whispered. Ryan shook his head, his patience wearing thin. "No, Emily. I don't." Silence. And then, for the first time, Emily's mask slipped. Her lips curled into a tight, bitter smirk. "You'll regret saying that." And she walked out, leaving Ryan with a sinking feeling in his chest. Something told him this wasn't over. That weekend, Emily's obsession took a new form. She began stalking Lauren Mitchell. She followed her to the grocery store. She watched her from the parking lot of the daycare where she worked. She sat outside the Mitchell home, staring at the warm glow of the kitchen light, imagining what it would be like if Lauren was gone. Then, one afternoon, Emily's world completely shattered. She was sitting in her car outside Ryan's house when she saw something that made her stomach twist with rage. Ryan was standing in the driveway, and in his arms, Lauren. She laughed at something he whispered into her ear. Then, she placed a hand on her stomach. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Lauren was pregnant. Everything blurred. The world around her cracked. Lauren wasn't just a wife anymore. She was the mother of Ryan's child. And Emily? She was nothing, unless she did something about it. That night, Emily made her decision. Lauren had to suffer. If Ryan thought he could erase their love, replace her, start over with someone else, he was wrong. The next morning, she walked into the coffee shop near Lauren's school. her heart pounding as she placed an order. 1 tea, no sugar, just like Lauren always drank it. She slipped something inside, the powder dissolving instantly. Then, she walked into the daycare where Lauren worked, a bright smile on her face, her hands steady as she set the cup down at the front desk. "For Lauren Mitchell," she said sweetly. "From a friend." The receptionist didn't question it. And as Emily walked away, she smiled. Because in just a few hours, Lauren's perfect little life would come crashing down. That afternoon, Ryan got a phone call that made his blood turn to ice. Lauren had collapsed at work. By the time he reached the hospital, the damage was done. Their baby was gone. Lauren was weak, pale, but stable. The doctor said the miscarriage was sudden, unexplainable. But Ryan? He knew. And as he sat beside Lauren's hospital bed, holding her trembling hand, his mind was filled with only one name: Emily. And for the first time, he was truly afraid of her. Ryan Mitchell had never been more certain of anything in his life. Emily Parker had done this. There was no way Lauren's sudden miscarriage was a coincidence. The problem? He had no proof, no witnesses, no security footage, nothing to tie Emily to what had happened. And Emily knew it. 2 days after Lauren was released from the hospital, Ryan found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. It was folded neatly, almost carefully. His hands trembled as he opened it. "Now we're even. No name, no explanation." But he knew exactly who it was from. Ryan's breath came in short, shallow bursts as rage boiled inside him. How could she be so calm, so calculating? This wasn't some obsessed teenager anymore. This was a predator. And now, he was trapped in her game. In the following weeks, Emily became bolder. She made no attempt to hide from Ryan anymore. Instead, she made sure he saw her. She would show up at the school gym, watching from the bleachers as if nothing had happened. She would drive past his house slowly, just enough for him to notice. She would leave him voicemails at odd hours of the night, whispering things like, "You should have chosen me. She's not the one who loves you. This isn't over." Ryan stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, all he could see was Lauren's face in the hospital bed. All he could hear was Emily's voice in his head. She was everywhere. And worst of all, she was enjoying it. Then one evening, everything changed. Ryan came home late from practice, exhausted, his nerves already stretched to their limit. Lauren was sitting on the couch, staring at something in her hands. His stomach dropped when he saw what it was: a letter. Ryan's name was scrawled on the front in Emily's handwriting. Lauren's hands were shaking as she passed it to him. "What the hell is this, Ryan?" He hesitated, staring at the envelope like it was a live grenade. "Lauren, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That some teenage girl is sending you love letters." Her voice cracked. "That she knows where we live?" Ryan's mouth went dry. Lauren's eyes filled with something worse than anger. Realization. She knew. She didn't know the full extent, didn't know the affair, but she knew enough. And the damage was done. Ryan had spent months trying to keep his two lives separate. But now, they were crashing together. And Emily? She was standing right in the middle, waiting for the explosion. Ryan Mitchell had underestimated Emily Parker. For months, he had tried to ignore her, to shut her out, to erase every mistake that tied them together. But Emily wasn't something he could ignore. She was relentless. She was obsessed. And now, she was dangerous. Because after everything she had done, she still wanted more. And she was willing to do anything to get it. After finding Emily's letter, Lauren Mitchell stopped looking at her husband the same way. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't even ask questions. She just walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and didn't speak to him for days. Ryan felt the walls closing in. Lauren knew. Emily was watching. And worst of all, he couldn't stop either of them. Then, one evening, his phone buzzed with a text. "Emily, meet me. Now." A location followed. A deserted parking lot outside of town. Ryan's stomach churned. This wasn't a request. It was a demand. And he knew if he ignored it, she would show up at his house next. So, against every ounce of logic screaming at him to turn back, he went. The night air was cold when Ryan pulled into the lot. Emily was already there, leaning against her car, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. He barely got out before she spoke. She's ruining your life. Ryan's hands curled into fists. Don't talk about Lauren. Emily stepped closer, her voice soft but dripping with venom. Why not? She's the reason you're miserable. The reason you're stuck. The reason we're not together. Ryan shook his head. There is no we. Emily. Whatever this was, it's over. Emily smiled. But there was nothing warm about it. No, Ryan. It's not. She pulled something from her pocket and held it up. A small glass vial. The liquid inside shimmered under the parking lot lights. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. What the hell is that? Emily tilted her head, watching his reaction. Enjoying it. You think what happened to your baby was an accident. Ryan's vision blurred. He took a step forward, his entire body shaking. You poison her? Emily's lips curled into a smirk. She took something from me, Ryan. Her voice was almost casual, like they were discussing the weather. So I took something from her. Ryan lunged, grabbing her wrist, forcing her to look at him. Are you insane? Emily didn't flinch. She just looked at him with unwavering certainty. I did what had to be done. And then she leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. And I'll do it again. Ryan let go, because in that moment he finally understood. Emily wasn't just some obsessed teenager. She was a monster. And now, she was offering him a way out. She doesn't have to be in the way anymore, Ryan. Emily's voice was smooth, persuasive. I can fix this. We could be together. Ryan took a shaky breath. You're talking about murder. Emily shrugged. I'm talking about us. She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing against his. All you have to do is say yes. Silence stretched between them. Ryan stared at her, at the girl he had once thought was fragile, innocent. And for the first time he realized she would never stop, not unless someone stopped her first. Emily Parker had always been in control. She had manipulated, seduced, and threatened her way into Ryan Mitchell's life, making herself unforgettable, undeniable, irreplaceable. But for the first time, her plan wasn't working. Ryan had pulled away. He wasn't answering her messages. He wasn't sneaking around to see her anymore. And worst of all, he was still with Lauren. No matter what Emily had done, no matter how much she had fought for him, he had chosen her. Emily couldn't accept that. She wouldn't. It started with one last message, a desperate plea disguised as confidence. Meet me. One last time. No games. She sent it at midnight, knowing Ryan wouldn't respond. And he didn't. So she sent another. And another. By the time the sun came up, Emily's messages had turned to threats. She had tried being patient. She had tried waiting. But Ryan wasn't listening. If he wouldn't come to her, she would go to him. That night, Emily broke into Ryan's office at the high school. She had done it before, slipping through the side door, using a copy of his key she had stolen months ago. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't careful. She ransacked his desk, tearing through drawers, scattering files and papers across the floor. She was looking for anything, a note, a schedule, a clue about where he had gone. Then she found it, a folded flight itinerary. Ryan and Lauren were going away for the weekend. Together, a romantic getaway. Emily's heart pounded. The walls of the office seemed to close in. She could already see it. Lauren in his arms, laughing, touching him, stealing him away forever. No, she wouldn't allow it. The sound of a door creaking open made Emily spin around. Ryan. He stood in the doorway, his face a mix of shock and anger. What the hell are you doing? Emily's breath came in sharp gasps. I had to see you. Ryan stepped closer. His eyes darted to the mess she had made, the torn papers, the open drawers. Are you insane? Emily didn't flinch. You can't leave me. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Emily, you need help. This has to stop. Emily's face twisted. You don't mean that. Ryan clenched his jaw. This time, he did. Ido. And if you ever come near me or Lauren again. Emily slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed in the empty room. Ryan's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists at his sides. You ruined my life, she hissed, her voice trembling. Ryan didn't argue. He just turned away, walking toward the door. And that's when Emily made her final mistake. If I can't have you, neither can she. Ryan stopped. For the first time, true fear crept into his chest. He turned back, but Emily was already walking away. And that was the moment he knew she was planning something worse. Secrets don't stay hidden forever. For months, Ryan Mitchell had tried to keep two worlds from colliding. The life he had with his wife, Lauren, and the dark, suffocating nightmare he had created with Emily Parker. But Emily? She was done playing games. If Ryan wouldn't choose her, she would make the choice for him. The slip-up. It started with a mistake. A simple one. Emily was in one of her moods. Jealous, erratic, unpredictable. She had been waiting all day for Ryan to answer her texts, but he hadn't. So, she did what she always did. She went looking for him, and that's when she saw them, Ryan and Lauren together. It wasn't an intimate moment. Nothing that should have set her off. They were standing outside a restaurant, laughing about something. But to Emily, it felt like a knife to the chest. Like she didn't exist. Like Lauren was winning. And that's when she made her move. That night, Ryan heard a knock on his door. Lauren was already asleep upstairs. Something about the knock felt wrong. Too soft, too patient. He hesitated before opening it. And when he did, his breath hitched in his throat. Emily stood there, smiling. Her dark blonde hair was damp from the cold drizzle outside. Her arms were crossed over her chest, like she had been waiting for hours. "We need to talk," she said softly. Ryan's pulse pounded in his ears. "Emily, you can't be here." She ignored him, stepping forward. "Let me in." "No. Whatever this is, it's over." Emily's eyes darkened. "You don't get to decide that, Ryan." Ryan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. "You need to leave. Now." Emily tilted her head. "Or what?" she whispered. And then she reached in her purse and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. Ryan froze. "You're not the only one with secrets," she murmured. She held the drive between her fingers, twisting it playfully. Videos, texts, voicemails, everything. Her lips curled into a smirk. "You think your wife is suspicious now? Imagine how she'll feel when she sees proof." Ryan's throat went dry. "You wouldn't." Emily stepped closer, her voice low. "I'll do whatever it takes." And that was the moment Ryan truly understood. This wasn't about love. This wasn't even about revenge. This was war. Ryan spent the next few days on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then it happened. Lauren wasn't supposed to find out that way. But she did. A single envelope. No return address. Left in the mailbox. Inside, a collection of printed messages. Texts. Emails. A single blurry photo of Ryan and Emily together, taken months ago. Lauren didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply walked into the bedroom, packed a suitcase, and left. And Ryan? He sat on the floor of their once perfect home, staring at the wreckage of his life, knowing exactly who had done this. Emily. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Emily's obsession wasn't over yet. She had one final plan. And this time, she wasn't leaving without blood. Ryan Mitchell had lost everything. Lauren was gone. His marriage was over. And now, his darkest secret had been exposed to the world. The carefully crafted lie he had built for months had come crashing down, piece by piece, and standing in the middle of the wreckage was Emily Parker. She had won. At least, that's what she thought. What Emily didn't know was that Ryan had finally made a decision. For the first time since this nightmare began, he wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was going to end this. Ryan spent hours pacing in his now empty home, staring at his phone. Lauren had refused to speak to him, but she had sent one final message before she left. If she's capable of this, she's capable of worse. Be careful, Ryan. His hands trembled as he read it again. Because deep down, he knew Lauren was right. Emily wasn't done. And if he didn't stop her, someone was going to die. So when his phone finally rang, he didn't hesitate. Emily's name flashed across the screen. Ryan answered. "Where are you?" Her voice was soft, almost playful. "You finally want to see me?" Ryan clenched his jaw. "Enough games. We need to talk." A pause. Then a whisper. "Come find me." And the line went dead. Ryan didn't have to look far. Emily was exactly where he expected her to be. The place where their affair had started. The Lakewood High School gym. The doors were unlocked. Inside, the air was heavy, the lights dim, casting long shadows across the empty bleachers. And there, standing in the center of the court, was Emily. She was wearing his old team sweatshirt, her blonde hair falling over her shoulders. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "I knew you'd come." Ryan took a slow breath, his heart pounding. "It's over, Emily." Emily tilted her head. "Is it?" She took a step closer. "Because last time I checked, your wife left you. Your job is gone. Your reputation is ruined. And I'm the only one left." Ryan's hands clenched into fists. "I lost everything because of you." Emily's smile didn't waver. "No, Ryan. You lost everything because you fought it. Because you refused to see what was right in front of you." She reached for him, her fingers brushing against his wrist. "But you can still fix this." Ryan yanked his arm away. "I don't want to fix this. I want you to leave me alone." Emily's face twisted. "After everything we've been through, you still don't get it, do you?" Her voice dropped, low and trembling with rage. "I'm not going anywhere." That's when Ryan saw it. The gun tucked inside Emily's jacket pocket. His pulse skyrocketed. "Emily." Her fingers curled around the handle. "I'd rather die than let you walk away from me." Ryan's stomach dropped. This wasn't just obsession anymore. This wasn't just manipulation. Emily was serious. Ryan raised his hand slowly. "Put the gun down." But Emily's eyes were wild, filled with something unhinged. "You love me," she whispered. "I know you do." Ryan's heart slammed against his ribs. He knew there was only one way this would end. And just as Emily lifted the gun, the doors burst open. Police swarmed the gym. Emily spun around, the gun still in her hand. "And oh," she screamed. Gunshots rang out. The sound shattered the silence, echoing through the empty gymnasium. Ryan hit the ground as officers tackled Emily. When he looked up, Emily Parker was on the floor. Blood spilled from her chest, pooling onto the polished hardwood. Her fingers twitched, her lips parted, and as her eyes met Ryan's one last time, she smiled. Then she was gone. The night Emily Parker died, the nightmare finally ended. Ryan Mitchell gave his official statement to the police. The messages, the threats, the stalking, it was all there clear as day. But no explanation could change what had happened. Emily Parker had once been his student. Then she had been his lover. Then his nightmare. And now she was just a name in a police report. But for Ryan, it didn't matter. Because he would never be free of her. Not really. The bullet wound was fatal. Emily Parker bled out in the middle of the gym floor, her once vibrant eyes staring at nothing. The officers who had fired their weapons rushed forward, checking for a pulse. There was none. The girl who had fought so desperately for control had finally lost it. Ryan Mitchell watched it all unfold, numb, barely registering the flashing police lights or the voices shouting around him. Emily was gone. But the nightmare? It was far from over. Ryan was taken into custody that night. Not as a suspect, but as a key witness in what was now labeled a police-involved shooting. The news spread like wildfire. High school senior killed in police standoff with former coach present. Tragic end to affair between teacher and student. Who was Emily Parker? The headlines told half the truth. The world saw a young girl taken too soon. They saw a promising student who made a terrible mistake. But they didn't see the manipulation, the threats, the calculated destruction she had orchestrated. And Ryan? He had no interest in defending himself. He sat in a cold interrogation room, staring blankly at the table as detectives pelted him with questions. How long had the relationship been going on? Did you ever feel threatened? Why didn't you report her sooner? Ryan answered what he could, but the truth was he didn't have answers. He had let this happen, and now, 2 people were dead because of it. Ryan didn't know how long he sat in that room before they let him go. But when he stepped outside, Lauren was waiting. Her face was pale, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her wedding ring was gone. Ryan's stomach twisted. "Lauren, don't!" Her voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the cold night air. Ryan swallowed hard. "It's over," she said. Whatever you thought we could fix, it's done." Ryan expected anger. He expected yelling, accusations, even hatred. But what he got was worse. Lauren didn't hate him. She just looked at him like he was already dead to her. And somehow, that hurt more. Without another word, she turned and walked away. And Ryan let her go, because he knew she was right. Their marriage had died long before Emily did. The Lakewood community was in shock. Emily Parker became a tragic figure, a girl consumed by obsession, lost in a love that was never real. Her funeral was packed with grieving classmates, teachers, and parents who whispered about what had gone so terribly wrong. Some blamed Ryan. Some blamed the police. Some just shook their heads and called it a senseless tragedy. But one thing was certain: no one would ever forget it. The school quietly let Ryan go, issuing a statement about protecting students and upholding professional boundaries. Parents demanded stricter rules, more oversight, more protection for their children. And Ryan? He vanished. He packed his things, sold the house, and disappeared from Lakewood forever. No social media, no interviews, just silence. Because what was left to say? He had destroyed his own life. And for what? A moment of weakness. A mistake he couldn't take back. Now, Emily was dead. Lauren was gone. And he was alone. Years later, people still whispered about the scandal that rocked Lakewood. They still asked the same questions. Was Ryan a victim? Or was he to blame? Did Emily love him? Or did she just want to own him? Could any of this have been prevented? But in the end, the only truth that mattered was this: obsession doesn't end in love. It doesn't end in a happy ending. It ends in destruction. And for Ryan Mitchell, it ended in ruin. Lakewood moved on. The town, the school, the people, they all moved on. The gym floor where Emily Parker bled out was scrubbed clean. The headlines about the affair, the shooting, the scandal, they faded into yesterday's news. A new basketball coach was hired. A new group of students filled the halls. And Ryan Mitchell? He became nothing more than a ghost. But ghosts don't disappear. They just become forgotten. After the funeral, after the interrogations, after the looks of disgust from parents and colleagues, Ryan packed up and left. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just gone. Some people said he moved to a different state. Others claimed he changed his name, started over, tried to rebuild something out of the wreckage of his old life. But the truth? Ryan didn't start over. He simply existed. He drifted from town to town, taking low-paying jobs where no one asked questions. Bartender, warehouse worker, construction, anything that kept him out of the public eye. And at night, when everything was quiet, when there was no one left to blame but himself, Emily Parker's voice still haunted him. You love me. I know you do. If I can't have you, neither can she. You'll regret this. Some nights, he saw her face in his dreams. Other nights, he saw Lauren's. And in both, he was drowning. Lauren Mitchell never spoke Ryan's name again. Not to friends. Not to family. Not even to herself. She moved to a new city, changed her last name, and built a new life. She never remarried. Some people said she couldn't trust again. Others said she just wanted to forget. But the truth? Lauren didn't hate Ryan. She pitied him. Because at the end of it all, he had nothing. No wife. No career. No home. And Emily? She had taken everything from him. Even in death, she had won. Every town has its dark stories. And in Lakewood, Emily Parker was one of them. Some people saw her as a victim, a girl who had been manipulated, used, discarded. Others saw her as a monster, a predator who stalked, threatened, and ultimately destroyed the man she claimed to love. And Ryan? His name became a cautionary tale. Be careful who you trust. Never mix business with pleasure. Don't let weakness ruin your life. For a while, the town whispered about him. But then, time passed. And like all ghosts, his name slowly faded from memory. Years later, in a small town no one had heard of, a man sat alone in a rundown motel room. The walls were thin. The mattress was old. The television flickered with static. And in his hands, a single newspaper. The article wasn't about him. It was about another scandal, another teacher, another mistake. Ryan Mitchell let out a breath, rubbing a hand over his tired face. It never stopped. The cycle, the destruction, the ruin. His life had been just one more example. A tragedy people forgot, a name no longer whispered. And maybe, just maybe, that was for the best. Because some stories don't need endings. They just need to be left behind. Time moves on. People forget. New scandals replace old ones. New names fill the news. New tragedies capture attention. But some ghosts never leave. Some names never truly disappear. And for those who live through it, the story of Emily Parker, Ryan Mitchell, and Lauren Mitchell never ended. Because memories don't fade. And guilt lasts forever. Lakewood High School never spoke of it again. Not publicly, at least, but inside the halls, whispers remained. New students heard the rumors about the cheerleader who had died in the gym, about the coach who had disappeared, about the affair that ruined everything. Teachers warned each other in hushed tones, sharing glances when young girls got too close to their mentors. And every year, when the anniversary of Emily Parker's death rolled around, a single white flower appeared in front of the gym doors. No one ever saw who left it. No one ever asked. But it was always there. A reminder. A warning. A ghost of the past. Still lingering. Lauren Mitchell never returned to Lakewood. She built her life somewhere else. She never remarried. Never had children. Some said she never recovered from what happened. Others said she simply wanted to forget. But forgetting? That was impossible. Because sometimes, in the middle of the night, she would wake up to the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, to the memory of a hospital room, to the phantom feeling of a wedding ring she no longer wore. And sometimes, just sometimes, she thought she saw Emily's face in her dreams. Not angry, not vengeful, just waiting. No one knew what happened to Ryan Mitchell. There were rumors that he was working under a different name, that he had left the country, that he had ended things himself. But there were no records, no proof. Just a man who had once been someone and now was no one. Somewhere, maybe in another city, maybe in another country, he still woke up every day, still carried the weight of every mistake, still lived with the knowledge that two people had died because of him. And maybe, just maybe, he saw Emily in his dreams too. Maybe she whispered to him in the dark. Maybe he never really left her behind. Maybe he never would. Obsession. Betrayal. Love turned to hate. It never ends the way people think it will. It never ends with happiness. It ends in tragedy. It ends in ruin. And for those left behind, it never truly ends at all. Because some ghosts never fade. Some names never disappear. Some choices can never be undone. And some stories haunt you forever.